So we ended up out in the at this place that my friend rented, and it was just ironic that we're like, oh, look at that, there's some cows, and then we're like, we've got to play the song now.
I just how good can a rapper be if they have a track called "Bitch I'm a Cow"? Like, what?
Again, keep in mind that I think this is one of those scenarios where your worst song gets lifted up. And then suddenly everyone likes it, you know? And it's not about, I think, wow, such a great song.
Is it maybe more, just like the title was just something like a little clickbait kind of thing? Like, I'm going to call the song Bitch I'm a Cow and I'm going to rap like I'm Ghostface or something?
No, the whole song is about being a cow.
Really? So it's just like, I go moo.
You should play it.
Yeah, okay.
I would play it.
Don't play it.
Yeah, we'll have to.
Maybe later.
We'll check it out.
We're recording.
We're recording.
Okay. So don't play it. Don't play it. Don't play it.
Just get started.
Yeah. I wasn't sure if that was the cold opener or not.
I guess it is. That's our cold opener. Dude, season 4, man. You don't know. We're talking about camping now. It's a camping podcast. Hey, guys. Thanks for joining us to Campsite of the Year podcast. Now, this is Album of the Year. My name's Chris. I got with me to my right, Marty Kawa, as always. And you can hear the other voice in the room. Someone this has been a long time coming.
Absolutely has.
Because I think we were talking to Cadena before we even started the podcast about getting him on at some point. So this is Stephen Cadena, one of our good friends.
Yeah. DJ Shoestring in the house.
DJ Shoestring in the house.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I always go by Steven, so if you meet me.
Do you know the hip hop group Dayton Family? From Flint, Michigan.
Yeah, there's
one of the dudes in Dayton Family is Shoestring. He's an MC though. You know that? You ever heard them,
no,
Chris? They're really
man.
They have a couple of records
under Outkast.
Yeah.
Okay.
They have a couple of records, and they have one called FBI that stands for "Fuck Being Indicted," which is really interesting. That's like their most popular record, and for some reason, that record was all over the place. Like my junior year of high school. Everybody was listening to it. So
we kicked off the season 4 with our tribute to Neil Peart, which was a lot of fun. We had a guest on that.
We had Dolph on there. Yeah,
that was fantastic. It wasn't how we intended to kick the season off, though.
It wasn't.
We were always going to do it with Steven, so we've been talking about this now for a couple of months.
Yeah, probably since around Christmas time. Yeah, basically. You know, we started to lay the eggs for the episode back then, knowing that it would be after Christmas that we would record it. But it's
I think we picked a year. You guys had mentioned that you wanted to hear my jargon for some reason.
Your jargon?
A long time ago.
You're jabbering.
You're jabba-jabba.
So I was kind of treading this day. I'm surprised.
It's treading.
I'm surprised you guys got a camera, a microphone, I don't even know what it's called, in front of me, because I usually don't, I don't do microphones.
This is a rare occurrence. You're not a vocal guy.
No, he's a DJ.
Yeah.
I'm the guy behind the scene usually.
You're like, give me an MPC and I'm good.
Yeah.
That's kind of your stilo, right?
Yeah.
I love it.
I sometimes think about having like a partition between me and
you need to
and the crowd.
Like one of those DJs who has a mask or something.
Yeah,
like some
dead mouse or something.
Mask.
I've seen some cool DJs pull off the mask and just kind of going crazy on stage.
So the one time I saw Flying Lotus at Fun, he was behind like a screen, and he had this almost kind of like green screen suit on, and you could just see his eyes were like glowing, and it was fucking pretty wild. It was pretty crazy. We saw him at Emos, and it was just him up there. But yeah, man, it was fucking wild. But anyway. But that has been done before. Yeah, go ahead.
Let's
Chris,
talk a little bit about your background, though. So, I mean, you are like a hip hop dude, or started, right?
Yeah.
I'm a hip hop dude.
I mean,
Yeah, no, I know. It's like a
hip hop head or whatever.
It's like a weird inside hip hop rap joke. Like, I am hip hop. I don't know what that means, but I just know I feel it.
You feel it in your bones kind of deal?
No, I mean, I will say, I grew up in the 90s with, The Chronic, probably as my one of my introductions to really good, what I thought was, cutting edge hip hop, and then Nas and all the Wu-Tang craziness that hit. So
I don't remember when we discovered, like, when I'm trying to think of one of the first conversations we had about hip hop, and I don't remember it. It must have just happened really organically, because
we're both so hip hop. But
that's true. That's true.
I think it's one of those things. It's like, you see someone in maybe like wearing a certain style, or maybe they drop that one lyric that you're like. And then you give them the nod, and you're like, now we have that connection,
that's dope. Yeah, this guy, he's all right.
Yeah, like
he knows about like Cool G Rap 456 and KRS-One and shit like that.
I mean,
so
again, the '90s hip hop really kind of reeled me in, and then
it was a great time to be alive, wasn't it?
I was lucky enough, The other thing is, here in... God, I'm taking over now.
That's the whole point. That's what we're doing.
Here in Texas, at least my experience, we didn't get all the cool radio stations and all the cool TV shows. So it was a little bit of... you get the taste, and then you kind of chase it. You have to dig a little.
Where'd you grow up?
Well,
grew up in Austin?
I was born. I was born in Texas, and I moved to Austin in like 1986 or 87. So I'm first through, graduated high school here, and I figure I'm an Austinite, just like most people aren't really born here in Austin, but.
I think if you got here in 1986, you consider yourself.
You're a unicorn, bro.
Yeah.
I always tell people, like, if you spent any part of your formative years in Austin, you're a native. Like, you're an Austinite. Yeah. Like, if you got here in the 5th grade, you've been here longer than me, man. Like, as long as you didn't come here after you were an adult, like I did, then you're a native Austinite. Like, I've been here 11 years.
I don't know where I stand on that, because I didn't live here until I was in college, but I used to come here all the time from Belton, like drive down and stuff. So probably doesn't count. Probably.
And to be clear, I'm from the Leander Cedar Park area, so don't tell anybody. But
you were talking a minute ago about growing up hip hop and being, a kid and adolescent and loving all that music. And I remember there was a thing going around Facebook a few years ago, and it was name your top 5 high school albums or whatever, albums you listened to in high school. And I remember mine were like Outkast, Wu-Tang, like a couple others. I don't remember exactly what they were, but they were all like boom bap, like hip hop, like all that shit. And I remember somebody saying, man, those are like my favorite albums from like last week. And I was like, yeah, man, like I was listening to all that shit in high school. Like I was listening to Liquid Swords and Ghostface Killah, Iron Man, and like, all that stuff. And it was, like I said, it was a great time to grow up. It was a lot of great music and a lot of rolling around with 212s in the trunk, like thumping that bass. That seems really ridiculous now, but
that was actually
that happened.
You were so cool if you had a system in your car.
I didn't. My homie did. My buddy Kevin Rogers. He had like a fucking 200 watt amp, Jensen amp, 2 fucking Serwin Vega 12s or whatever. Man, like that was like the shit back then. That was like what you wanted to be.
Yeah, especially if it was in a cool car and then you had a system. Oh man.
Yeah. If you had like a truck or like an SUV, like a Chevy Blazer or something, that was the optimum kind of oeuvre of having a bass in your face system, was having a car like that. If you had a car like that, it was like fucking forget about it.
Yeah,
like
the car is loud. The car is loud. The system is loud.
You can hear you 5 blocks away.
The person inside is loud.
That's what's up. That's the truth, man.
Yeah.
So, it's cool that you guys are talking about that. I mean, 97 is the year that we're going to cover today.
I was going to say we let the cat out.
Kind of let it. Yeah, it's all right. It's 97 was a big year. We were talking about just a second ago that like all of us were in high school in 97. 97 is the year that I graduated. One more year for you, right, Marty? You're 98 and you're 99, Cadena.
I graduated in 99.
So that would have been one of the few years where we were all kind of doing our bid in high school.
Sure.
And I was kind of touching on the subject, the fact that I feel like going out of junior high and then into high school is really when I was coming into my own musically, just taste wise.
Sure.
I didn't know what I liked, and even though I this hip hop sort of surrounding me with all this good rap music that was coming full circle at that point. There was other music out there, and that's kind of why we're here today, because I like music in general, and hip hop is just part of that.
Yeah,
so
totally.
Maybe my favorite part, but
no, I get it, and I think '97 hip hop is still pretty strong. Like I want to get everyone's beat on '97 briefly, and then what we're going to do is something kind of special or different than what we normally do. Since we have Cadena here and Marty here, and to a lesser degree me too, but those two in particular, we want to talk about '97 in terms of hip hop for a little bit. Like what was going on in hip hop in '97, but before we get to that as a topic, what about just music in general in '97? What was your perception of where music was? You would have been like a sophomore in high school or something, right? Did you feel like it was in a good place? Do you feel like really strong memories of loving that music, or what?
I felt like coming out of the '80s, and the way the hip hop was starting off in the early '90s. Oh yeah, I was feeling good.
Yeah,
actually, probably too good. Some of that stuff, I felt like, oh, this is how music is supposed to sound.
Yeah.
All the, that hardcore East Coast, with Wu-Tang and with Nas and Biggie, and then the West Coast and that whole thing. It was supposed to be hard, and it was supposed to have attitude.
Right.
And the music was obviously pushing the culture, and maybe the culture was pushing the music.
Yeah.
And that's what you get. You get the sort of, what maybe someone would call pure, right? That feeling. I lived in a suburb here of Austin, Texas, and I sort of felt like I could experience some of the stories that they were talking about in the real streets in different cities. And that was a cool connection. And obviously not just for me, but for everybody that got a chance to be a part of hip hop and early.
But let me challenge you a little bit. So, but are you talking about like the early '90s? Because to me, the '90s are interesting because by '97 we're getting into the late '90s moment, right? So the transition has really happened, and there's no secret. I come from more of a rock background. Rock was basically hitting the iceberg in 96, 97. You know what I mean? Like, there's some great exceptions to that, and we'll get to it in a bit. But the big rock of the 90s, the classic albums of the 90s, had mostly already been recorded by this point in rock music. Nirvana, gone for 3 years.
You say like grunge is almost like
grunge is dead. I would say 97. There's no more great grunge albums in 97. You might be able to sneak in, I think, a Soundgarden album from 96. But
it was a Super Unknown came out in 96.
95.
Really?
94, 95 for Super Unknown.
You might be right.
Blow Up the Outside World or Down on the Upside is 96, I think.
Right.
And so that, Yield comes out in 97, 98 or something. So, if you want to call that grunge, but I think at that point, Pearl Jam is is now a legacy band. It's not like that's front and center anymore.
Right.
So, grunge is, I would say, over by 97. Britpop, which was kind of, for me, an alternative to grunge for a couple of years, is over by 97.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it's over. That's the year Oasis comes out with Be Here Now, which is,
that's right.
And the wind is out of the balloon at that point. You know what I mean? It's their big statement album, and it kind of flops. Blur gives up on Britpop. Right there on the wall, man. Yeah. It goes a different direction, and it goes an indie rock direction.
Yeah.
Pulp doesn't release an album in 97, but they release This Is Hardcore in 98. So, which to me is like the epilogue on that. So I guess what I'm saying is the big rock style of the UK, over by 97.
Right.
The big rock style of the US, grunge, over by 97. And we're kind of thrashing around looking for something else. And for me, what was interesting in 97, I'm already playing in like a rock band, and we're thinking about those kinds of things. And there is a lot of great rock in 97, don't get me wrong, but I reapproached hip hop in 97.
Yeah.
97 is because I hadn't been listening to hip hop. I didn't listen to The Chronic. I didn't listen to Doggy Style. I was aware of it.
Sure.
But I didn't listen to it actively.
Yeah.
But 97, I was probably Busta Rhymes. It was probably listening to I remember seeing Dangerous on MTV and being like, why the hell am I not listening to stuff like this? You know what I mean?
See, I think that's an interesting point, because there was a lull sort of musically when these big styles were kind of in this weird sort of time. There wasn't anything that was pushing the boundaries, like you said, after grunge and punk and all of these different waves had come, I felt like obviously hip hop today sort of dominates a lot of youth culture, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And that's wasn't happening when even in after 93, 94, 95, hip hop was still sort of being shoved in a different category, and like, oh well, that's street music, or that can't be serious like, pop music,
it's urban.
And it's and it wasn't getting, even though maybe underground, it was sort of getting respect and getting a following, obviously, right. But it still wasn't quite what an A&R would want to pay you $5 million and then put it on the radio or whatever.
Radio. I think it was starting to happen, though. I mean, 97
it was
Life After Death. I mean, that.
Well, and I was going to say that coming out of those earlier, what most people call the golden age of hip hop, I felt great. I was like, it's gonna happen.
Right.
And then there comes Puff Daddy or whatever, right? So it wasn't quite where I thought it should have been.
Well, if we're looking at 97, just speaking in terms of hip hop. This is like a crossroads year for hip hop, right? You have, not only do you have kind of like mega hip hop stalwarts making statements like Wu-Tang Forever, Biggie, Life After Death, Jay-Z, In My Lifetime Volume 1, even like Common, One Day It'll All Make Sense. You also have like Capone and Noriega, The War Report. You got boom bap stuff. You got KRS-One comes out with a record, a kind of a comeback album. You have different regions that are starting to shift, and you have certain kind of tectonic plates moving with, for instance, like 3 6 Mafia. They have a big record out this year. Twista has a big record out this year. Master P Ghetto D is like a huge, one of the biggest like No Limit albums ever. And then you even have like Timbaland doing crazy spacey production with Missy Elliott. And then you also have the beginnings of indie rap. You have Atmosphere Overcast comes out in 97. Company Flow, Fun Crusher Plus comes out in 97. So this is a year where hip hop not only broke, but hip hop splintered into a million different directions. So based on that, I mean, that's a really interesting kind of, kind of topic to cover. Even like Bone Thugs had that Art of War record. So you have like all these newcomers, you have all these new styles. You also have people that have been seasoned like Scarface and, EPMD, they're coming out with records. So you have all these splintering and all this really crazy things happening. And you can basically say hip hop is the most commercially viable it's ever been. And you could also say it's the most underground it's been. And you can also say it's somewhere in between in 1997. So that's a really interesting year, I think.
I think for me, maybe with my experience, my journey, right? It feels like the earlier 90s and the mid 90s hip hop, that real good boom bap stuff that most people my age love so much. That opened a lot of doors, I think.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that not only for, technology was catching up too, so you could record for, real cheap.
Yeah.
You could push out a lot of content really quickly.
Right.
And you got this splinter of like, some of these records that we'll probably talk about and touch on are, like you said, that went really underground, the sort of bedroom rapper producer, backpack rap.
Yeah.
Yeah. They spawned the Kanye Wests of the world or whatever. But, this was so wide open, you could kind of pick a lane. You like Southern rap, well, let's serve some up.
If you Mystical,
like if you like that more East Coast rap, they're fine-tuning and doing really dope stuff on the East Coast in 97, and underground West Coast, guys like Shadow and dudes like that were doing some really cool stuff. So it all sort of culminated. It was bubbling, and then the good shit rose to the top. Or
how did you guys feel as like fans of hip hop in high school at the time. You're still kind of figuring out your taste and stuff. And sure, stuff from a few years ago probably still spoke to you, just like rock did for me. But did you feel like I have ownership on all this stuff? Like if Timbaland comes out with something with Missy Elliott, I'm there. If there's a atmosphere or whatever, I'm there. Or did you feel like you had to pick more of a lane?
That's a good question, Chris. I think that I felt like that with Wu-Tang. I felt like there was kind of an ownership thing with a lot of that East Coast stuff. I felt, obviously it wasn't music that was made for us, white kids in the suburbs, but, we understood it and appreciated it for some reason. And I mean, I don't remember having to pick a lane. I remember just wanting to discover and consume everything that I could. I remember thinking like P. Diddy or Puff Daddy or whatever. Like I was going to get Life After Death, but I wasn't going to go out and get that Puff Daddy record. I was going to get Bone Thugs, The Art of War, but I'm not going to go out and get fucking Will Smith, Big Willie style.
Right. So I mean, you're always going to have stuff that you like and don't like.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, I just was, as you're talking about the splintering of hip hop a little bit, like sometimes in rock that'll happen, and then it's like, oh, well, yeah, but you kind of, like I was a grunge puppy, right? Like listening to very grunge stuff, but I wasn't listening. Right. There's other forms of rock that I just ignored, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wondered if that happened in hip hop.
I think for me, it was definitely just a hodgepodge of, I want to listen to everything that sounds cool, right?
Right, so, yeah, I was going to say something like that too. That makes sense.
So like, it definitely, it's like, I feel like it was almost a little bit of a YouTube rabbit hole, like nowadays, you would maybe call it. I was just click on something, and then I ended up, for me, I ended up really kind of going down this hole of underground hip hop, and led me into hieroglyphics and West Coast underground, living legends and like I said,
alcoholics,
some alcoholic stuff. That was part of it, but again, then that kind of led me into, then there's Too Short, and I remember Too Short did some cool stuff, and E40, and then you kind of connect those dots, and Scarface, and then again, that was also a big part of maybe Southern pride when Southern rap started getting a little bit of credit. All of these things kind of happening at the same time just sort of made you feel confident. It made you feel like you were sort of doing the right thing. Yeah. And I also kind of felt like I was getting away with a little bit too. I guess my parents didn't really parent. And a lot of my friends would like not be able to listen to certain things. I'd be like, I'm just gonna go buy it, and then we'll jam it together, and so kind of being a part of all those different avenues maybe was a little bit changed my experience in different ways. It doesn't mean that I didn't appreciate Southern rap when I was listening to underground West Coast hip hop, and it didn't make me feel guilty when I wasn't listening to West Coast hip hop and I was maybe listening to East Coast.
Because there was a time where like people were kind of East Side or West Side.
There were boundaries. Absolutely.
Yeah. Very clear lines drawn. So you said something very interesting, Stephen, about having a feeling of validation when it came to hip hop, and 97 being emblematic of that validation, considering it had reached this like critical mass. I kind of understood that too, because it's like my parents, they tried to parent me when it came to hip hop, and they tried to not let me buy records with parental advisory stickers on it, but I went out and bought them anyway. And I remember my dad taking my rap CDs away when I got bad grades, and I just found where he hid them and listened to them anyway. And Dad, if you're listening, I'm sorry. I turned out fine. But I remember my parents especially. Yeah, that's questionable at best. Did you really turn out that great, Marty? Anyway, but I remember my parents.
It was those De La Soul albums, man. They ruin your life.
Fucking Daisy Age, man. No, but anyway, I just remember my parents, especially my mom, saying hip hop, it's never gonna last. It's a fad. It's like people are not gonna give a shit about it. And that kind of validation really kind of sunk in and let me say no, dude. Like, it's here to stay. Like, hip hop's not going anywhere. Like, look at all this shit that's out. Look at all this music that people are consuming. Like, sorry, you know.
I also remember around 1997, like MTV did a thing that was like a weekend where they were just playing like old school rap videos with like. Like I don't remember who they had, but it was like
Fab Five Freddy or somebody like
that.
Well,
but they would also have like DMC would come in and talk about the history of Run DMC or something like that.
I know what you're talking about.
And so it was actually really cool because I remember seeing it around 97 and being like, oh wow, rap has now been around long enough that it has a history, and being like, and it's not that I never was like super like anti-rap or anything, but I wasn't into it. Like I was too busy listening to my Nirvana records or whatever to listen to it. But I remember around 97 thinking like, oh man, like there's this whole like treasure trove of like artists, like what the heck, who the heck is Rakim? You know what I mean? Suddenly now I'm kind of late to the game, but like figuring out that all this stuff was interesting to me. So
well, even for someone that, like I said, I tried to stay on top of what I thought was cool hip hop and stuff, and it took me a while being that close and being a pretty dedicated fan. I had to go back and listen to some of that older stuff, even a little De La or Lil Rakim. Yeah. I wasn't quite up on all of that stuff, and just to make sure that I had my chops up, right? I had to force myself and really kind of go relive those records, and it was cool doing so. But it's definitely hard. Even back then, it was hard to keep up with what was current and at the same time make sure that you knew everything that came before. History, right? That's part of it too, because you don't want to be praising something that's maybe been done and you're like kind of showing your ass or whatever. In hip hop, they'll make fun of you real quick. I don't know. Yeah. But again, it's also a cool community.
Did either of you guys ever try to MC or anything? Or
I did not. I tried to freestyle a few times.
No, and I can, for the record, say I've never rapped ever.
I've definitely tried. I've tried to freestyle a few times. And
I don't even like karaoke. I gotta be real drunk.
All right, well, let's talk 97 in hip-hop specifically. What are some records? You were naming some off, right? Like, what are some that, like, we could have a quick discussion? Not like a full 20-minute blowout on albums, but just like a speed round almost. Like, bring one up and we'll kind of talk about it.
I gotta say something about a few of these records. Let me see that thing. I don't have my internet. Because, again, these are some of these records were really kind of important to me, at least. And then some of these... I didn't get around to until a little bit later, and I had to go back. I'm going to name off. So Wu-Tang Forever was definitely one that was the sophomore record for Wu-Tang, and very, very much anticipated by me, at least.
By everybody. I was telling Chris, I remember we bought that record the day it came out, and we just drove around the sub Fairfield, Westchester, Sharonville, just bumping that record whole day. Like, it was crazy.
I don't know to this day maybe if I've been up on and then anticipated a record for so long, because after I heard 36 Chamber, it was literally like right then I was like, I want to hear the next one. And they had like already had planned
it was already
Forever. It was coming out like in a year or whatever. And so that was a big one, and the fact that it was a double LP, that was great.
That was huge, and like hip hop was starting to go into that double LP territory. Like they're making a statement like it's the Clash London Calling or something, like Wu-Tang Forever double album, you know. Double LP World Excited, like that was fucking great to hear here in Triumph. And I remember after the football game bumping Triumph when we'd win, like that was fucking great, man. I
remember hearing Triumph back then and being like, that's pretty cool, but now that I'm more familiar with Enter the Wu-Tang, like I do think that that's a stronger record. I mean, is Forever often considered like a kind of a classic record, or is it?
I mean, I would say, in my opinion, no. And if you're, a fan of boom bap, anybody else in here? Marty?
This guy, definitely.
But I try not to sort of like just be like in that moment of history. There's other cool stuff since then, right? But there was the highlights. You know, again, I mentioned Nas and Tupac. Everybody knows the East Coast, West Coast. I don't even think we should touch on that. Yeah, but that there were cool times. The Chronic, this Snoop Dogg, and I gotta say, 36 Chambers is one of those classic records that start to finish, front to back. Most people would say that still stands up today.
Yeah,
and is really their some of their best work, right? They have obviously so many facets to Wu-Tang Clan and lots of good content, but this one was their first sort of that really proved they were in the forefront of that type of that style. They really created that sort of style.
So wait, so you're saying 36 Chambers or Wu-Tang 36 Forever?
36 Chambers for sure. Wu-Tang Forever was that extra sort of push that was like, yes, definitively they are the best clan. You know what I'm saying?
So when Wu-Tang Forever came out, it felt larger than life, and it was larger than life looking back on it. Now, like Stephen said, if you're going to compare those two records, Enter the Wu-Tang, even though it's shorter, it's denser and it's better material because it's like every track is a banger from front to back. It's just a perfect hip hop record. Wu-Tang Forever, I think, deviates and gets a little weird at times, and I think that's okay. But Wu-Tang
Forever always happens with double albums.
Yeah,
you know
exactly.
What I mean?
Wu-Tang Forever is a statement, I think, that had to be made, and it's an ante that had to be upped. And I think, you know, you have Enter the Wu-Tang, and then you have all the Wu members going off in all their solo directions after that, and then they all come back for Wu-Tang Forever. That's part of what made it larger than life and what made it so huge. And I think that's indicative of how the record sounds. Yeah, at this point, it's like the NBA All-Star Game tonight. Like, that's what Wu-Tang Forever was. But it was really fucking awesome, you know, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't. I think, you know, Enter the Wu is a stronger record, but Wu-Tang Forever still is very important to hip-hop.
I think it was for sure important to Wu-Tang, and definitely for hip-hop to have a record that was very long,
right?
And maybe some extra stuff stuffed in there that probably could have been left out. Right. But they wanted to make it a double LP and make it a big, huge statement. And it was so anticipated. There was a lot of hype. I don't want to call it hype because it wasn't fake hype. It was like legitimate. It was everyone was excited. But artistically, I think there was a little bit more mystery. There was a little bit more sort of that they kind of broke the mold with the samples and the styles that the RZA did with that
36 Chambers.
With Enter the Wu-Tang 36 Chambers. I was trying to remember the full name of the record. It's like, you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, like, I feel like the little shroud of mystery with the introduction of the 36 Chambers was really, I remember sitting on the bus. Shout out to my boy Jacobian. He hooked me up. And I listened to that record for the first time. I remember being like, this is different. And it was. And that was what was so cool about not knowing and then knowing about the Wu-Tang. Yeah. Now it was just anticipating. You knew all the characters. You knew that they were going to come hard.
You just can't. Yeah, you know it's going to be a good record.
You're just going to hear it until it was out.
You can't be surprised again.
And then bam, and it was a big long record.
Cool. Well, what about some other things on that list?
I was looking at. So I'm going to mention Camp Low, Uptown Saturday Night.
Yeah.
Big underground record, and also something that I didn't get around to till maybe a couple of years later, but such a jam. Again, that was kind of part of, I think, that was really not a lot of people heard of that, about that record, I think, if you weren't a big hip-hop fan.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I'd say I wasn't aware of it until you mentioned it the other day when we were kind of prepping for this. Like, I don't even know that record. Yeah. So,
and it's a great record worth listening to
Lucchini is a classic hip-hop song. Lucchini, Falling from the Sky, Let's Get Lit, What? Yeah, it's got a really classic break in it.
I like the idea. It kind of shows the lighter side, maybe, of hip-hop.
Yeah, it wasn't gangster
groovy.
rap. It's groovy.
It's groovy, and it kind of has that little bit of that bedroom, sort of that old school boom bap feel, and it's not too much and it's not too little. So, really good record.
Agreed. And there's that Alcoholics Liquidation record.
I listened to a little bit of that.
Yeah,
that was making me
so
laugh.
Madlib has some production on that, and the Loot Pack are featured prominently on that record. Which the Loot Pack was Madlib's rap group. And Madlib would go on to be this kind of mega producer, as he is now very big with the Freddie Gibbs project that he's doing under the helm right now. He works with a rapper named Freddie Gibbs, and they have 2 really big records. But that was like the first. I think he was like their touring DJ too, on that tour.
Dilla?
No, Madlib.
Oh yeah. No, I went to
the
last Freddie Gibbs show, and Dilla wasn't there, but
Dilla
it was really cool.
Dilla's dead, homie.
I mean, no. I'm sorry, Madlib wasn't there.
It's like.
You mentioned Madlib, and then I just started daydreaming.
I was like, would Dilla reanimation technology get farther along than I thought?
I wish.
All due respect to Jay Dilla. No disrespect.
I was also looking for some Dilla records in '97. I don't think I found anything. Hit me up.
There was the Slum Village.
Right, I was going to mention that.
Yeah,
right.
So Slum Village was his like group before he kind of broke off. But.
So Liquidation we talked about. And that was also one I didn't realize until later that Exhibit was part of the Alcoholics.
Yeah, he was in the Alcoholics. Yeah,
he was.
Yeah. Again, that's one of those
Swift, Tash, J-Ro, and Exhibit.
J-Ro, and that made me go back. I actually appreciate J-Ro better as a rapper. But that was an interesting little loop back. You kind of go, oh, Exhibit, and then I go back and listen to some Alcoholics again. Okay, so Ghetto D. I got to mention Ghetto D. Y'all mentioned it, but this record, teaches you how to cook drugs right in the very first track.
Make crack like this. It's
and
fucking
that,
ridiculous.
For me, was incredible that you could even do that on a record.
Oh, Master P went there like crazy, man. Like, he was the guy. And No Limit Records and Master P, he's so intriguing because he has almost this like punk rock aesthetic. And we've talked about it a bunch on the podcast. I mean,
because like I'm still trying to wrap my mind. I guess I just got to sit down and listen to the album because like it's something I've never been able. Even back then, I couldn't quite wrap my mind around. It's like some guy on a gold tank. I'm like, what?
It's like He actually like the production, like his early shit. He was like jacking beats from other rappers and stuff, and like making his. I mean, and it was really some like lo-fi shit. And like the album covers are like punk rock show flyers, man. And like they're all just like super like shitty
Photoshop with like some crazy like
not even Photoshop. It's probably some like shitty like Windows graphics program and like
see that's part of the beauty, right? I think that again, holla at Master P, shout out, but if you hear this, but Master P,
make him say
Master P was really a business wise was a genius because he took something that was a product of a bedroom. It was somebody that had a beat machine and a recorder, probably a 4-track or something is what he started with, and he records like Ice Cream Man. Like I had to go back a little, but like this is like sort of slow before screw music really
it was kind of like off, it was kind of like that Houston shit a little bit, slow
and low, and it was real sort of gangster, I guess. And for the South, we were just happy if you could do anything from the South and get a name for yourself.
That's true.
And he took that and really made the most out of those smaller records that maybe less people know about. Whereas Ghetto D was a huge record, and I believe went platinum, if I'm not mistaken.
Ghetto
maybe
D,
multiple times.
Ghetto D went nuts.
And everybody knows those. Well, at least everybody my age that was into that kind of music knows those songs. And I was just listening to this on the way here, like Bourbons and Lacks.
This is for the bourbons and the Cadillac.
That's the outro song.
Fucking song.
That I don't remember how long that record is, but I believe it's almost
it's like 19
20
songs.
tracks.
Yeah,
it's for almost
sure.
20
it's
tracks.
Dense as fuck. Yeah,
and a lot of those tracks have catchy little beats.
Yeah,
catchy little hooks. And there's not much substance beyond that, but it's really really good stuff, and especially for that year, it was fun.
Master P understood branding better than anybody.
The Tank,
ever.
Exactly.
Yeah, like he saw the Wu-Tang Clan model, and he said, "I'm gonna do that, but I'm going to master the branding and the marketing of the product, and it's gonna go gangbusters." So you have Silk the Shocker, and C Murder, and you have TRU, and you have all this other, he had all this whole stable of rappers and producers, and he just kind of let them run wild, and then he put the records out, and he would do the lo-fi fucking album covers that looked like punk rock show flyers, and people went crazy. I remember working at Best Buy that summer, and man, people would come in and just buy every fucking No Limit CD. Like if it had the No Limit Records tag on them. Too. I remember this one dude, he bought 16 CDs, and he was like, well, they're all No Limit shit, so I had to have them. I'm like, dude.
That's the
that
other
guy's
thing.
Still spinning those records. He's like, I only ever bought 16 records in my life. It was all on the same day in 1997, and I'm still spinning it.
It might not have been 16. It might have been more like 8 or 10, but I remember he just had a fucking stack of CDs.
That was the other thing, too. I remember specifically going, okay, No Limit Records is sort of dominating, so then you would line up to get all of the other artists. So Silk the Shocker,
you had to have
Mystical. I got into Soulja Slim.
Yeah, I forgot about Soulja Slim. Holy shit.
R.I.P. Soulja Slim. But stuff that no normal person would really listen to.
But just because they were all kind of like a stable of
he had
guys.
Compilations too. He had he
was
like West Coast Bad Boys and Mean Green, and he would do comps that would have showcase all the rappers, and it would be like Master P presents, and you'd want to buy it because it had his endorsement. It really
does sound like a Wu-Tang kind of thing. It really was like Wu-Tang meets freaking Mad Men or something. You know what I mean? From an advertising agency or something.
Well, he understood aesthetic and he understood branding.
I feel like the unique thing about No Limit and Master P, for me at least, was the thing that stands out was I feel like that was more of an independent level, right?
Yeah,
no one was really doing it on an independent sort of level.
It was you wanted to get signed. You wanted to and I mean Puff Daddy did it in a way where he could basically say I own this lock, stock and barrel, but MCA is going to put it out or whatever. But the objective back,
there was still a lot of glitz and glamour though surrounding all of that.
But Master P was
it was straight basement.
It was like selling tapes out of the trunk, even when he was fucking huge, selling millions of records. That's true.
Even if it wasn't, it still had that feel.
Exactly.
He might come and pop trunk on you and try to slang you.
I got some Ghetto D cassettes.
Silk the Shocker,
I got this new C Murder.
Yeah, exactly.
Seriously, man.
Yeah.
That's kind of awesome because it really does make it feel more like a punk rock thing.
Yeah, totally.
Like we were talking.
Well, and I can only imagine what was going on actually in New Orleans or in Louisiana. Texas being one state over was probably just feeling a little bit of the aftershocks. But again, we were happy to have anything that was from the South getting a little bit of exposure. Yeah.
Well, awesome.
UGK was kind of getting
they were starting
a little bit of love then too.
Yeah, that's
right. P mentions I did a song with Pun B.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think
in one of those songs.
Yeah. UGK had a record back then in 96, I want to say, that was kind of huge. So I remember people had that cassette back in the day when I was working at Kings Island, amusement park by where I grew up, and I remember cats would be passing that UGK.
Riding Dirty?
Riding Dirty, yeah. I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Again,
something I was probably late to, but the news didn't travel fast back then.
Yeah, there was no internet. I mean, there wasn't internet. I mean, all this shit wasn't on the internet, and there was no YouTube, and everybody's got these dial-up connections, and so I mean,
it wasn't uncommon for me to see go back and revisit a record that was maybe 1 or 2 or 3 years old that I should have probably known about.
Right.
No, that was normal. I mean, same thing happened to me, where it'd be like, oh, cool, like even Nevermind. Like, I remember it being on the radio in 91, 92, but I didn't own a copy of it till 93, like 2 years later,
See, I had that record.
Oh, yeah, you had
day
that from
one.
Day one,
like,
yeah. My little girlfriend in junior high, she... that was her favorite song, Smells Like Teen Spirit, so like she was into it, and I was like, oh, I don't know, but I kind of like Mr. Big too,
I'm the one who wants to be with you.
Yeah, so it took a little while to kind of figure out my my taste.
Funny. Oh, I wanted to mention one more, maybe one of my favorite records ever, underground records at least, is Lyrics.
So that's Lyrics Born.
Lyrics Born and Latif the True Speaker are Lyrics.
I don't know that record.
So it's a very, very cool record if you like underground hip hop, and that was kind of all of the best things about underground rap at that point kind of got poured into this little sort of beaker, and out came Lyrics. I think it's the first track. They're kind of wild, and you have basically Latif panned all the way to the left, if I'm not mistaken, and Lyrics Born panned to the right, or vice versa, and they're rapping at the same time.
Oh,
and
really?
You hear
it's like some Gang of Four stuff. Man.
Yeah, kind of like hip hop Gang of Four.
You hear this, and your brain gets confused at first, and you really can't decipher what either of them saying, because they definitely have a unique voices and lyrical sort of styles, and they just sort of go at the same time. They sort of play off of each other back and forth. Again, there's some production from Soul Side, so like some DJ Shadow production
has some
in there.
Tracks on here, yeah.
And there's some other production, I believe, probably from some of the Blacklist guys or something. But or I'm thinking no, I'm sorry.
Gab, or no, he's the MC, but
no, because I was thinking Cut Chemist and
J5?
maybe some stuff like that. But anyways, I think that the bottom line is it's a different style, even from the East Coast, from the Southern rap that we kind of touched on. Mm-hmm. Then you've got this thing all the way out in West Coast in California, and they're not doing it the same. And that was also kind of one of those things that said, the stuff that they play on the radio, and maybe hip hop is coming to age or whatever, but there's also this other stuff that no one's paying attention to. I want to listen to that.
Yeah.
And I got into this way. It was probably 4 or 5 years that I didn't really listen to almost any radio, pop, rap, hip hop. Mm-hmm. I was all listening to pretty much strictly underground rap for a little while, and maybe not by design, or maybe it was because of where I was at in life. But that was a really great record. Now I still go back to, I've rebought it like the 20th anniversary or something on vinyl, and it's just one of those where I can put it on, I can listen to it, and it just relaxes me. It takes me kind of back. It's a really great record.
It's really good. I'm not familiar with that record, so I'll have to check it. I did listen to Slum Village that you mentioned.
Yeah, Slum Village is great. Yeah,
man, I liked it a lot.
Yeah, good stuff.
It reminded me of kind of Tribe a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
So
very similar. I mean, Dilla was very influenced by Tribe and by like Pete Rock, so you're going to hear a lot of those flourishes there. But yeah, no, great record, great stuff.
Well, awesome. Well, cool. Well, we'll keep talking about 1997. It's a 2-part episode. The second part, we are going to talk about a little bit more about the charts and the pop music in 97. But I'm glad we got a chance to kind of go over some of you guys' view of like where hip hop was in that year.
Talked about hip hop so much so that now that I can surprise you guys with my pick.
Yeah, totally.
So great. Well, I enjoyed that conversation a lot, guys. And why don't we go ahead and get started? Today, we're going to cover one album. We're going to cover, Stephen, your choice for album of the year 1997. Tell us a little bit about it.
So this album means a lot to me. It is one of those ones that I revisit frequently, and is different than all of the other stuff we've talked about. Yeah. I like to, have broaden my horizons and sort of have different stuff to listen to depending on my mood. And this one is definitely a mood throughout the whole thing. Mm-hmm. Lots of feeling. The production on this record is probably some of my favorite, and I probably know less about all of the names of the people that were pushing the buttons and whatnot, but I think that as a whole, the vibe of the production mixed with the vocals on this record are really kind of what hit home, probably for most anybody that really likes music, I would hope. It's very musical, if that even... How can you describe music as being musical, right?
Hey, I've heard music that's not musical.
It's out there.
Know when you see it. You want to hear a little bit of this record?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, yeah, let's do it. So
taking me back.
Just starts off so cool. Those drums.
Yeah, it's fucking crazy, man.
That bass.
Very simple.
It's not oppressive either. Yeah, I like that about it.
It almost makes you think that you could like make something like this.
Yeah.
If you were talented enough. Yeah, I've definitely tried to make beats just like...
Did you really?
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Good luck finding an artist as strong to carry it.
That's a little different.
Yeah. So for those of you who recognize this, I mean, it's a no-brainer for 1997. For those of you who don't know this record, you're in for a treat because this is a fantastic record. It's Homogenic by the incomparable Björk.
That's right.
And when you said that this was the album you wanted to do, I was like, score, because that would always have been on my list of possible albums.
I couldn't believe you wanted to do a record that wasn't hip hop.
I can't either. Now that after,
but I'm glad.
But honestly, the reason I picked this record is probably because as much as I like all of the other styles of music, this particular record it sort of coincides with the time of my life where I was really just at the tipping point of learning what I liked about music, why I like certain things about music, and really just how far I could go with the different things that I wanted to listen to. And the record front to back, I think, is great. It's got some moments that are really kind of harder. It's got some moments.
There's some heaviness on this album, man. That's crazy. I didn't see it coming really, but
it's got some soft moments too.
Yeah. It's kind of all there,
It carries a lot of mood and feeling, and that listening to so much. Maybe it's alternative I was into, or maybe after that I got into rap and. Listening to like some old soul music and stuff.
Right.
I think all of those things, just one thing that they have in common is it gives off a certain mood. And I think if you can sort of connect with music that gives you, whether sometimes, I think I've talked to you about this, if I'm in a bad mood, maybe I want to hear bad music or sad. Sometimes if I'm in a good mood, I want to hear happy music. And sometimes I just, maybe you want to hear sad music, right? And so, hip hop does that in a certain way. I'm sure like punk rock music, a lot of people, or metal, people get into it because they get that feeling. Right. And I think that this was a different sort of feeling and mood for me, at least musically. This was my introduction to Björk, and so I had missed her first record, which was, remind me,
Debut. Debut is the first one, and then Post, and then
Post. That's right. So there were two before I actually had to go back and then listen to some more of my favorite Björk songs. But I think this one, again, start to finish, I listen to a lot. It still sort of holds up to this day.
For sure it does.
Not sort of. It for sure holds up to this day. And it is also maybe now kind of just one of those records that leaves me a little bit nostalgic and makes me sort of think back to when I was, when it was the late 90s or whatever and early 2000s, and I was able
stretching out a little bit and
listen to a lot. Yeah, a lot of different music, and this one definitely sticks out as one of my favorites.
So this was actually your first exposure to Björk, huh?
Yeah, I think I was at a buddy of mine's, and what's up, Mike McCarthy, and then his roommate had a girlfriend. And
when would this have been?
Again, we're talking maybe 2000, 2001.
Okay.
This was when I was starting to want to DJ. My buddy had some turntables, so I go over there. And one of their girlfriends, one of the girls that was hanging out over there, had played It's Oh So Quiet.
Right.
And I was like, what is this show tune? But then she's like screaming and It sort of got me, and then my buddy's like, dude, you don't know Björk, here, listen to this. I had a chance to listen to Homogenic all the way through before I was like, wow, like, not only does she have a really unique and a strong voice, I think that was also where I connected the dot, where she had done something at the MTV Music Awards or something, or...
2001 was when she was at the Academy Awards, I think. She did
wear, like, a funky dress.
That's where she wore the swan and everything.
Did she beat somebody not too long?
Oh, there was something where she beat up a
paparazzo.
Yeah,
and I don't know if it must have been after that, because I was like, I remember this chick being famous for something else. And then I was like, oh, well, she's a really great singer. Now I like her. So I've actually never had a chance to see Björk live, but
she's a great white whale. Yeah, she's one of on my top 10 list of people that I would love to see that I just have given up on ever seeing.
I have a friend that saw her at Coachella where she did her thing, and I was pretty jealous about that.
That'd been awesome.
Me too. Yeah. When the Sugar Cubes got back together, they did a one-off show in Iceland, I think.
Oh, really?
And I really seriously, me and my wife, before Evie was born, so Steph and I were like, should we?
Let's go to
it's
fucking
completely
Iceland,
reckless,
man.
but let's just go to Iceland and see the Sugar Cubes. It'd be awesome.
I don't know if it's reckless. People go to Iceland all the time.
Yeah, man. I know, but it's Reykjavik.
On a whim.
It's not reckless.
On a whim, bro.
On a whim. That's true. On a whim. Yeah.
Yeah. Just to see Björk, it's pretty expensive.
That's fair. That's fair.
I'd go for Sade.
Yeah, Sade. Yeah, for sure.
For Sade.
Yeah.
I don't think you'd have to go to Iceland to see Sade.
I'd go anywhere.
You have to go to North Africa or something, or France, right?
Anywhere. I think
she played live at the Irwin Center a few years ago.
Yeah, I missed it.
2000. It was a while back. It was
I missed it.
2013, I think. Yeah, she did a U.S. tour back then.
Let's not talk about it.
Yeah, let's just breaking our hearts here, man.
Definitely Björk. It was a moment in my life where I was also kind of going out on my own, right? So I had sort of dabbled with what direction I wanted my quote unquote career to go, and then that sort of just didn't pan out. And so I ended up, again, music was really kind of what floated me through those few years.
So Marty, you said, you told me just a little bit ago that you had never heard this record before. Do you have much exposure to Björk at all?
I've never listened to a Björk album from front to back.
Wow.
Ever. Yeah.
I'm glad that you're getting exposed to it.
I had never been opposed to Björk. I think the reason why I kind of shied away from her was because I knew she was she is a titan artistically, and that was kind of intimidating for me.
I love that.
Because I was just kind of like, what if I don't know where to start? Where do I go? What do I do? Björk is just this kind of massive artistic figure, and people just absolutely love her.
Oh, she inspires obsession in a way that very few artists do.
Crazy.
I feel like I don't want to compare her to Bowie, but she had an artistic approach.
Yeah, I can see that.
And I think that they were just two people that were kind of particular about their art, right? I appreciate that. Maybe that's cool to be real loose with your art, and you get something like punk rock, a lot of that stuff is super messy, and it's cool because it's messy, right?
Right.
But I also appreciate the really tactful kind of, maybe a little picky and kind of purposeful with your with your music. She was, I heard some stories that she was sort of a titan. She'd kind of kick people out of the room. She'd,
strong personality.
Right,
and that's great. Like that's there. I'm not dissing that. That's awesome. You
listen to it, right? You like?
Of course I did. Okay. Yeah. In fact, I was going to say, I mean, maybe this is a little premature, but I felt like a lot of the sounds on this album are things that people are doing now like they're new. She was doing it 20 years ago. Like she literally figured it out and mastered electronic music 20 years ago. I mean, there's
that's how it felt at the time. Like I got to say, so my first exposure to Björk was with the Sugar Cubes when Hit was out. So Hit was actually played on the radio some. And I remember hearing it and being like, this is amazing. Like this is so wild. And if you listen to it, it's not the best, it's not even the best Sugar Cubes song, but you can hear Björk in it. Like you hear that.
Sugar Cubes were like a punk band, right?
Kind of, but they had their own sort of weird alternative vibe too, sort of. Let's give a little bit of like Björk's history, just to kind of, for people who don't know about Björk, they're like, oh, what, the one who wore the swan? Who's Björk? So Björk's from Iceland. And she was pretty much at a very young age started being pushed towards music and art. And she was her parents were artists, and they put her into like a classical music school. And so she studied classical music, like the flute and different stuff, and was on Icelandic TV, had an album out when she was like 11.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So she was completely, but being pushed in this kind of direction, which she rebelled against. And then she went through a series of like bands that were really like punk sounding bands. Right. And so but she was already kind of fully formed as a singer. Like she could already sing, like you hear her sing on this record almost like when she was in her late teens.
She didn't change, her voice didn't quite change, and her style didn't quite change very much at all, which is probably to her, a good thing for her. Mm-hmm. Her Wikipedia page is crazy, by the way. I had to read through a lot of this stuff too, but yeah, like I didn't realize how young she was. I believe this says somewhere that she was like 12 when she signed her first deal with the Sugar Cube.
That's crazy.
And she's like directing these band members, like telling them, to get the F out or whatever. Probably, like.
I don't think it was the Sugar Cubes technically. I think there were a couple of people.
They signed her, I believe. You're right. They believe they signed her solo, and she had incorporated some Sugar Cube songs later.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But she had like a series of groups and stuff that she played with, one called Kook or something. Huh. And there's like, anyway, they're crazy. There's one that's called like Cork the Bitch's Ass or something.
What?
Like it's really, really bizarre.
Wow.
But what's interesting about her through this period is that, it's punk, but it's more musical because she has that classical music background. Mm-hmm. And I think also she has an obsession with making Icelandic music. Like, what does it mean to be Icelandic? Like, to make something that doesn't just sound like a copy of what's going on in the rest of the world, but to make something that is sort of true to their experience. And I think that is an obsession she probably carries with her to this day. Like, you see her talk about music, she still talks about it in terms of, her heritage in Iceland.
I think that's a lot of pride for her country, and it's kind of obvious when she sings, transitions into the next song. I think Joga is basically her ode to the land that she's from.
Yeah, sure.
And she really does kind of paint a really vivid picture. It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. And the video for this shows tons of like beautiful landscapes. So she talked about the emotional landscape, and she is comparing herself to, Iceland, of course, is volcanic rock next to glaciers and stuff, and dark, 22 hours of darkness in the beautiful part of the year and everything. Let's hear a little bit of Yoga. The other thing about this record sonically is, and I was telling Marty this because it's a strange point of comparison, but it reminds me a little bit of the White Stripes, even though it doesn't sound a thing like the White Stripes, but because it's very specific, it's very committed to a sound, which is the mixture of electronics with strings in her voice. It's those three elements pretty much throughout the whole record.
Yeah, I think the other thing I noticed about these first two songs, there really is no driving beat.
Yeah.
Except for the first track, you have the kick drums.
Yeah. Right.
This track, you have drums. They're getting filtered.
They'll come in, yeah.
But they're not constant, and it's not really driving the song.
Yeah, it's really the strings that drive it.
And her voice, obviously.
Of course, right. Well, this is almost like that classical background that she had. Like, this is almost like a classical music piece.
It's a ballad, yeah.
Yeah. It's gorgeous. It's the centerpiece of the album for me. When I think of this album, I think of Yoga. That's the song that I think of it.
I like the way her voice kind of floats in and out of kind of the song. She has such a strong vocal talent, but she's not singing like she's fucking Taylor Swift or something. She's singing in this almost like, kind of like when we talked about the Cocteau Twins. Mm-hmm. It's kind of reminds, not like that, but it reminds me of that. It's kind of like undulating and sweeping and orchestral, kind of like the string arrangements and things like that. Mm-hmm. And I really dig that. Like, you don't hear vocalists that have that strong of a talent sing like this really ever. And that's what I think is really striking about this album. I mean, I haven't listened to any other Björk records, and I guess I should now, but that's one of the things I really like about how the vocals were approached and how she approaches the vocal part of her records is very much as abstract as the rest of the music,
sometimes you hear singers and they sound like saxophone players or something like that. I would say she very much sounds like someone going wild on a violin. Like totally. It's very, especially on this record. This is there's probably more emotional content on this record than there is on some of her previous records, but that strength of her voice is something that's kind of true throughout. I think even go back to the Sugar Cubes.
Sure.
Yeah, I would agree. Again, I think the combination of her voice with the strong instrumental track, and then they're weaved in together really well. So it just really does make for a good song. It's pleasant. I don't know.
It's really fantastic. So I want to give my kind of background with Homogenic because, like I said, I had kind of been into Björk before this. Like when Debut came out, Human Behavior was a huge track for us, and it was played on the radio next to grunge. Like I wasn't just listening to like Nirvana. I was listening to a lot of different stuff. And people, you mentioned Marty, that Björk felt like she was like an artistic titan. And I mean, even at the time, there was this feeling that Björk had her own thing, like she was singular. There was nothing else like Björk, and nothing else could be like Björk.
Prince.
Almost like
even
Prince.
Even more so.
I would say even more singular than Prince, because Prince, like his talent was singular, but you still had like elements of James Brown and elements of Jimi Hendrix and stuff, whereas Björk seemed to come from Mars or something.
Right.
And Post really kind of felt that way, because like you mentioned, It's Oh So Quiet, but it's like that song was like this big band song, but then you had Army of Me on the same record,
one of my
and
other favorite songs.
So good, man, and there were like and we looked at Björk like, okay, she is basically like the most important living artist,
That one, Army of Me, I think is one where I've heard the Sugar Cubes do that song, and there's one online somewhere. If you can't find it, I'll give it to you, but it's really cool because that was my introduction to the Sugar Cubes. After I learned about Björk, I had no idea that she was doing stuff before, so you go all the way back.
Singing in Björk, that's always so funny when Einar starts singing, like, Björk singing and then some dude just starts rapping or something, and you're like, what? Where's this guy coming from?
Apparently the RZA wanted to work with her. Like they wanted to do a Wu-Tang Björk kind of collabo, and it never didn't work out because the Wu-Tang was on tour or something.
I think there's probably been a lot of artists that would pine to work with Björk.
Yeah, of course, man.
I don't know what would fit, honestly. Maybe the RZA makes sense, but
maybe. I mean,
I don't know.
It would be so strange, like hear a Method Man rap and then Björk sing the hook. I don't know, like
that a little too close to home or something,
I would love it. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I've heard she's done stuff with like Tom York and stuff like Radiohead and things. So she has done some collaborations, but it's I don't know. It's hard to. I mean, she's like Sade in that sense. Like anything she touches, she's going to make better. It's going to be amazing. But you can't just put that flavor in anything. You can't just be like, hey, here's a Chris Brown and Björk. I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
But I have a feeling, though, that she would sort of want to take over if she didn't like it. She'd be like, nah, RZA, you can't release that.
Right. Sorry, homie. 100%. This is not up to my seal of approval or whatever. No, totally.
Yeah, she's not just going to do a mixtape with some random, you know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
So is she making these beats?
A lot of them she is.
Really?
Yeah,
okay, because I've been reading some reviews and stuff, and I've been reading that she worked with a lot of like British DJs to make some of the beats too.
Yeah,
which is cool. I'm not dissing that. It's really interesting.
How much is her and how much is?
I've heard some mixed stuff about how she comes about her beats, and to me, kind of that's one of the more intriguing things. From production standpoint, I like the idea of picking apart the beat and trying to figure out who made it and whatnot, I guess. And it's not always easy with Björk.
I know that she's talked about carrying around like portable beat making equipment and stuff, and
she carries like recorders, like ambient noises and stuff. Yeah. She's got a lot of strange noises, and I think that part of that is because she has worked with some. You were mentioning the guy that did like with this Nelly Hooper.
Yeah,
and I think she's kind of takes parts of these dope producers and sort of just does her own spin on it, and ends up with some really cool electronic sounds. I mean, some of that stuff is, like I said, seems like it's just weird ambient, recordings, and then some of it's like strange samples and electronic synth. And a lot of that is the coolest part is weaving that stuff together, because I've tried and it's not easy to make that sound fun and.
Well, and then like taking that and mixing it with like strings and other kind of musical ideas. Yeah. And then, I mean, there have been a lot of people who tried to mix electronics and strings and failed. I mean, just because it just sounded corny or something. Or
almost
whatever.
Any live instruments pit up against a synthesized instrument doesn't always go well.
Yeah, it can
There's
work,
always the chance that it might just sound lame because it's obvious synth and obvious live, and you're just pushing them together.
But I think if you want to make a case for it, though, this is like the best album to point to like how it can work.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I'm going to give an example of that, maybe a little bit of All Neon like. What do you think?
Yes, good one.
One of the great tracks on this record. So check this out. She's kind of.
The other thing is not these tracks aren't all 4/4 either. I like the idea of being just free form. Yeah. This one maybe is, but
it's almost like a chiptune beat or something. Kind of. It's not like an NES or something. Now, granted, this doesn't have. Let me correct myself. This doesn't actually have the strings on it right there, but I love the way that beat comes in at that moment. Like it kind of adds this extra layer to it.
It's that slow sort of limping along kind of Again, I feel like even with this kick and the filtered drums, isn't really driving this song. There's so much more to this song than just the drums. Although it's setting the stage early, and you get that little rumble that starts to come, and then you get all these other different sounds that really kind of ties it all together.
Yeah. No, I agree, man. I agree. And like Chris was talking about chiptune, the track after All Neon, like 5 years, I feel like that has some serious, chiptune kind of precursors in it, if you will. Can you play a little bit of it, Chris?
I agree with that. And I actually wrote that down too, that like both this and All Neon like seem to follow from
listen to this shit.
Yeah, listen.
It's like a Farfisa almost or something. I don't know. That's what it sounds like.
I mean, definitely like some kind of organ, and then you hear those big,
like
lo-fi.
So awesome.
Some of these kicks sound like thunder, and some of the snares sound like lightning.
I like it when
which is part of her vibe. You know, it's like mixing that sort of environment of Iceland into the vibe of the record.
I love it when drums are produced unconventionally, like when drums sound really like erratic and brittle and weird like this. Like I don't know, it just
nowadays you'd have to either be intentionally going for a sound like this, or you're just doing something weird.
Exactly. Yeah.
I love that song. It's got one of my favorite lines on the record where she's like, "I'm so bored with cowards who say they want but can't handle. You can't handle love. I dare you to take me on." It's like
she's a powerful person.
Very much a powerful person.
She's a tiny little thing too.
Yeah. She has, big balls, man. You can tell by her songs, you know, like bigger balls than us three for sure. And like, so, I don't know, but
Yeah, no, I sometimes say Björk is like Yoko Ono done right.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's
where it's
totally
like,
true.
people always like say Yoko Ono is trying to like push the envelope and do all sorts of crazy stuff, but it just ends up being like kind of stupid.
Yeah.
Whereas like Björk does the exact same thing, but everything she does is
works.
Like, whoa, that's crazy. That works.
She
all
gets
about
it.
execution, man.
Totally.
So
I think you mentioned like the liners. She has a really good line. I believe it's Alarm Call. Where she's like, I'm no fucking Buddhist, but this is enlightenment.
Dude,
like,
we were talking about that before you got here, that lyric. I was listening to that song on the way over here.
There's a lot of kind of, that's another thing that I really like about Björk is that she's got funny, like, sometimes with artists like Björk, and especially with an album like this, which is pretty intense, a lot of times there's like, I'm all serious. Right. It's all business. You know what I mean? But there's some of my favorite funny lines in any Björk album are on this album. You know,
she definitely doesn't take herself that seriously when she is in the realm of her music.
Yeah,
she takes her music very seriously, but she can joke within her own little.
One of my favorite things in Hunter, like in Hunter, is this intense. You know, we started off with it, but it's got this intense, sinister kind of dum 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 dum. And she's saying, "I'm the hunter. I'm going hunting," and it's this kind of. But then when it opens up at the bridge, she says, "I thought I could organize freedom. How Scandinavian of me!"
Right.
I love that line. You know, it's just so
very
like
real with herself.
Yeah. And then have you guys seen the video for that?
No.
That's where I first heard Hunter and first heard anything off of Homogenic was that video. And it's she's got a shaved head and she turns into a bear at the end of it.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's so wild, you know.
Maybe
and it's
I
so
haven't
great.
seen that video.
I gotta get like Thomas actually has a drawing of that on his wall.
Does he really?
Yeah.
Well, isn't your sister a big Björk fan?
Yeah, she's a huge Björk fan, and I mean, pretty much everybody I knew back then was a Björk fan. Like we all loved her. Like she was just so.
That's also part of being a Björk fan is hard because like if you know about Björk and if you like Björk, you're like, oh, you're a Björk fan.
You're
right?
one of
like,
those people.
Well, I just like that shit. I don't know.
No, it's
I don't
awesome.
actually have any. I don't have any qualms about being a Björk fan or talking to people about it. But it's funny how quickly. You know, you can say something like, oh, yeah, I like Björk. And then you're like, oh, my gosh, you've either made an immediate friend or someone that wants to ask you a million questions.
Yeah, well, it does seem like the world is in a constant state of discovering Björk. Like, even when all that was happening at the Academy Awards, I remember it was like, we'd all been into Björk for 7 years at that point. Mm-hmm. And then, like, there were people that I was... like at the school and they were like, who's this Björk person? And I'm like, how can you be in music and not know about Björk at this point?
That's how I felt.
But I think there's still people where that's true, where it's like she's just kind of, for as huge as she is, she never did break through in, you know, because I think she's just too singular to be like a Taylor Swift or something. You know what I mean? Like,
I don't know if she wants to break through she like that, right? Like,
I mean, she broke through, don't get me wrong, but in
that way, right?
Records, but not like like my.
She's not pushing any commercial records at this point. You know what I mean? I don't think so.
Well, she's still putting them out. You know,
I think she's still putting music out. Yeah,
right, but sure, I don't think she's pushing it with a label, with a tour.
No,
she's not.
That's true. Yeah, well, that's not really how everything's designed anymore either.
No, I mean I've seen T-shirts,
like a T-shirt. That's about it, right?
Yeah, I got a poster somewhere. I hang on the wall.
I saw it. It's a.
Oh yeah, Björk's up here. She's on the wall. Yeah.
Yeah. Where is she at? Oh yeah, she's up there by Kurt,
up top,
right? In between Kurt Cobain and Run DMC.
Nice, how appropriate.
That's perfect.
Yeah,
so good. Yeah. I don't. It's kind of tough to approximate. Like, you know, it's unfortunate that somebody like Björk, you know, isn't going to be. Chris, you talk all the time on the podcast about when you were in music school and the people you met there and like the people that were there being songwriters and like the fucking country guy songwriter, like he's not going to know who Björk is.
Oh, that's a funny story.
If he tries to listen to this kind of shit, he's not going to know what to make
this is a funny story because Steph, so we used to bring in music to learn to sing, right? So like I would bring in a song. I brought in Moondance by Van Morrison. And I'm like, I want to learn to sing this song. And so we'd work on it in our music, our vocal jury thing, you know. Steph brought in Hyper Ballad. you know, which is such a great track, right? But it's basically a country music singer, you know, is doing her lesson, and he's like, "This is very unusual." Like, you know, like, you sure you don't want to sing some Tanya Tucker? You know, I mean, you know, the guy just. But like Steph still talks about it, like she didn't bring it in to like blow his mind, but she sure did when he listened to it. You know,
that's
like
great. I wish I would have been a fly on that.
Was he just like, I don't need to teach you anything, you know everything already?
No, he was just like, Steph brought that in to learn to sing it. So he was just like, I don't know how to teach you to sing this song, you know, like, and so they worked on it, and he like figured out the piano part, I guess.
Really?
Wow. Yeah. Cool. But I think they ended up having to sing some other thing. Actually, what happened shortly after that is that they picked like 5 really lame songs that you had to learn. Yeah. And that's when I gave up on the vocal jury thing, because I'm like, I am not going to learn to sing "If a Picture Paints 1,000 Words," because that was one of their songs. Like,
what song is that?
"If" by Bread. It was 2000, and they were trying to get you to sing a song by Bread.
Shit from the 70s, ballady shit from the 70s.
Get out of here, guys! Like, that was the most frustrating thing about that place. Like I loved those guys as people, but they were so out of touch, and they had no clue they were out of touch.
Yeah.
And they're doing better now. I think now that they're all connected to the internet, they're like, oh shit, my old Steely Dan records aren't really cutting it anymore, guys. You know, but back then, like, you couldn't even talk to them about it. Like, you would bring stuff. We would bring stuff like Björk or Radiohead to them and be like, hey, check this out. This is what's happening now. There's some cool stuff here, and they would just act like you were freaking crazy.
Well, it's like that one guy when y'all went into the studio and you told him you wanted him to play like Nirvana, and he said, if you want me to play like that, I'm just going to pack up and leave. That's bullshit to
me. Because anything after 1988 was garbage to this guy. So, musicians are weird, especially, I mean, we're in the middle of the country. Musicians a lot of times are like very weirdly conservative, and I don't mean politically, but I mean, maybe politically too. But like there's like one lane, and you got to stay in your lane. And it's like, since when has great music been made by people who just stayed in their lane?
I think the best example of that is like, you know, Radiohead, Björk, all this stuff. Like, those people don't know how to teach shit like that. That is art. Yeah, that's not music. Well, I mean, it is music, but like, you can teach Bread, because Bread is not an art. The song "If" by Bread is not this bold, dense, artistic statement. Right. It's fucking ballad rock from the 70s. Like, anybody can learn that and master it and teach it. Us three could if we wanted to.
Sure, all right, before the end of the night, episode 2, guys, tune in next week. We're going to do our version of "If."
But, you know, Steph brings in a Björk track, and like, it's so abstract and dense and artistic.
Like, sing Bachelorette. It's not going to work. You know?
Yeah, like, nobody, like some fucking doof at South Plains College isn't going to know how to teach anyone how to sing that, because it's like, shit, she's doing shit you can't, that's not teachable, you know. And like, I'm sure Steph could sing that song very amazing, you know, don't get me wrong.
Do like, all right, you know, but, I mean, it goes back to Björk was on the vanguard of music. She absolutely like the cutting edge. One of the, as far as an artist with wide appeal, I mean, she was the cutting edge. Totally. You know, and this album was hugely anticipated by people like me who were already deeply into Björk.
We're like sold. Yeah.
And I will say that when I first heard this record, it was challenging, like, because the other records are like super diverse, you know, like, and that's kind of even the name Homogenic, you know, the idea that this was going to be her first record where it's like a singular musical approach, as opposed to like this grab bag of, like, I know I already mentioned it, but like, here's a big band song, here's a crazy, you know, techno song, you know, here's a ballad, you know. This was all very much of a piece, and I remember listening to it and loving it, like loving the songs, but also feeling like I missed the variety. But what's interesting is, now that I've had years to listen to it, I don't know, it's a toss-up between Post and Homogenic as far as which one is my favorite. And Debut too, which I love. But
I think there are songs that I like from those earlier records, but as a whole, Homogenic is just, it's like you said, it's a sort of like a paragraph, right? It tells the story. You kind of got a beginning and a middle and an end, and it's
complete.
It's sort of you get there's continuity through the whole thing. You can kind of, once you're done, you're like, okay, I'm done with that. It felt whatever way you felt, but it's sort of like you put a period at the end, and that's it.
Yeah. Whereas the others are just great collections of great songs, you know, and there's something to be said for that. It's the Revolver approach, right? You know, as opposed to
you could almost say that with the opposite. We were talking about the Wu-Tang. I feel like their first record was front to back, like a statement. And their second record was sort of a hodgepodge of really good songs.
Yeah.
And there were a lot on Forever.
Yeah.
And they sort of, maybe they were leftovers from the 36 Chambers.
Yeah.
But it seemed like there were a lot of hard-hitting songs that, let's put this one first, second, third, fourth, fifth.
Yeah.
And put them in this order just because. Whereas, you know, the previous was...
I think there's something to be said about the album as a statement like that. You know what I mean? Like, those stay with you when an album works like that.
Everybody says they don't do that anymore, so maybe we don't get to experience that as much anymore. Maybe that's why we miss it so much, I guess.
Special artist, man, a great choice.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Couldn't agree more. Really glad that I got hip to this and finally took the plunge.
I'm glad I got to talk about it. Like I said, one of my favorites, even though it's kind of weird being a big hip-hop head and then being vulnerable.
Yeah. It's not something you say about a lot of hip-hop.
Right.
It's, you know, I mean, it can be, but not like this, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, but everybody should listen. You should be vulnerable too.
You should be vulnerable too. Well, what do you think, Chris? On that note, Chris and Stephen.
I would say let's all, guys, you got one more week to learn to be vulnerable, and we'll be back next week. And we'll do part 2. Stephen, you're going to stick around for that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah, fantastic.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
So we'll continue talking about 1997 next week. Between now and then, guys, enjoy yourself, and we'll talk to you very soon.
Talk to you
soon.
soon.
On the flip.
Thanks, guys. Peace. Awesome. That was great.